Kang is in that castle. But he's not controlling anything from there. He's been trapped there behind Alioth. Sylvie manipulated Loki into helping her free him, which they just did. Someone else is behind TVA and its main purpose is to prevent Kang from getting out. Theory: origin of all the school lunch plates. The episode was full of Easter eggs in the background. But at 8:17 they walked by a massive mound of school lunch plates. All the school lunch plates are the timelines where Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man didn't catch the lunch plate correctly when he caught Mary Jane. It's a silly theory, but it makes me laugh. That scene in Spider-Man famously took many takes before they got it right. If he had not managed to catch all of Mary Jane's food correctly, he might not have gotten much of her attention. I like the idea of the TVA trying to get the Tobey timeline just right by pruning every Peter Parker that drops the plate and looks like a dork. Why we may not get Kang as the main villain of Loki. As many of us have speculated, including me, that the time-traveling enthusiast Avengers villain, Kang will be the surprise villain of Loki. However, I don't believe he will be the physical villain in the finale because of the current trends in these shows. However, I do think he will be mentioned or alluded to in some sort. I guess I should start off with the obvious rebuttal. The entire concept on the show is about wibbly-wobbly timey-wimey stuff, and that is literally Kang's forte. While that it's true that the show focuses on time travel and the powers that govern it, I think having Kang as the villain be an obvious red herring, or at least him being the villain physically, is bait. This is not the first time we were given a fake-out villain. After the events of WandaVision, we were led to believe that the main villain would be a certain devil who should not be named and GT! But was given the bait and switch of Agatha all along. And dropping hints of Satan and satanic things would obviously mean that we would get the devil right. In F and Damp, WS we were sorta led to believe that Carly would be the villain, and while she sorta was, as after all she was a terrorist. And GT! We were given obviously US agent, sorta, and Sharon Carter being the power broker as many predicted! And LT. So far, in these D+ shows, we have a character be set up as a villain only to be baited as the real man/woman behind the curtain was revealed. I believe this will happen in Loki. Who I believe it will be is another Loki, but this Loki will have been a Loki who succeeded in winning against the Avengers and ruling Earth and GT, space and GT, time to create a timeline where only he may rule as an eternal king. I think it's Loki because narratively it makes sense for the god of mischief to create an illusion of some authoritarian time police to stop evil variants who may try to stop or usurp this King Loki. Why it makes narrative sense for who I am calling King Loki to be the main physical villain is because so far, these shows all have a common theme of moving along from the past and into the future. WandaVision was about Wanda and GT! Letting go of the false reality she made after Vision died at the end of Infinity War and moving on, or at least trying to, from the loss of her husband and fake kids, though I'd say she is not through with them being gone completely considering the post-credits scene we got! And LT. In F and Damp, WS. It was in GT! The mantle of Captain America being passed to Sam and Bucky trying to get over his living nightmare that was his time of being the Winter Soldier! And LT. Therefore, I predict that having our Loki moving on from his old desires of world conquering would be put to the test by this King Loki, and that defeating him and freeing the TVA would allow him to finally have his glorious purpose of being able to branch out of the typical Loki by being his own character and not tied down to the perceived only there to make other people better, which would be ironic as that would have been the purpose of King Loki, freeing his variant self. The theme of one's purpose has been brought up a lot in the show, and I think seeing Loki grow from the typical Loki mold to his own variant take would be the driving force of the plot, and I think that having King Loki be a perfect foil to that. Finally, to tie up loose ends, Renslayer and the Smog Monster in Episode 5, whose name is slipping me, being central to Kang. It's true that those characters are central to Kang's life, Renslayer being his girlfriend and maybe wife and the Smog Monster being an enemy of him. So how would I see them ending up by the end of this series? I believe Kang will have some presence as a setup to the new Ant-Man film. I think Renslayer will escape whatever happens next episode, and by the next time we see her, she will have a more comic-accurate costume with the blue-faced man. Maybe she gets lost in the quantum realm and he saves her or something. As for the Smog Monster, I got nothing, sorry. How Kang will be set up in this show? There are many ways. Maybe he will make a cameo or a name drop. Maybe there will be an allusion to him in some sort, but I don't think he will be the villain Loki fights at the end of the series. Or hey, maybe Kang will be the main villain of Loki. I guess we will have to wait for Wednesday. It was Mobius all along. Before diving into my theory, I want to first talk about the Mobius strip and how it could relate to my two assertions. A Mobius loop is a surface with only one side. It is the simplest non-orientable surface. It can be realized as a ruled surface. Orientability is a property of surfaces that measures whether it is possible to make a consistent choice at every point. The Mobius loop is a non-orientable surface. And damp, #X200b, hiding in plain sight, the Mobius loop practically describes the sacred timeline. The Mobius loop would have no orientability, meaning it would be impossible to make a choice at every point along it. Sound familiar? By pruning each branching alternate timeline at the stem, the TVA can keep the Mobius loop intact. And damp, #X200b, assertion 1, the sacred timeline equals the Mobius loop equals the Mobius timeline. Mobius, that's the proper flow of time, and it happens again and again and again because it's supposed to. Because it has to. The TVA makes sure of it. And damp, #X200b, but Mobius is a good guy that just wants to jet ski. You say, well. As the trailer for episode 5 explains. No one bad is ever truly bad, and no one good is ever truly good. And damp, #X200b, assertion 2, the big bad will be the original Mobius. And damp, #X200b, after following WandaVision and all the Mephisto theories, I am skeptical that Kang the Conqueror will be the overarching villain of Loki. These shows are meant to be complementary and are designed to set up the next phase of movies. Kang the Conqueror has already been cast for the upcoming Ant-Man movie, and so making him the villain of Loki as well would be overkill. Instead, I believe that the Mobius that we have grown to love is a variant of the original Mobius, Mobius Prime, who is in fact the big bad. And damp, #X200b, so, where's the proof? I think the writers are being subtle with their clues so that there can be a shocking reveal in the final 2 episodes. And damp, #X200b, foreshadowing, an indication of something that will happen in the future, often used as a literary device to hint at or allude to future plot developments. And damp, #X200b, Mobius, those rings were already there. Ravonna, and they're all from you. Mobius, maybe it's from your other favorite analyst. Here, Mobius is confused when Ravonna mentions that he created all the stains. If Mobius Prime is really behind the TVA, then they would technically be all from him / and damp, #X200b, Loki, you know, of all the liars in this place, and there are a great many, you are the biggest. I mean, the lies you tell yourself. Here, Loki accuses Mobius of being the biggest liar of them all. Specifically for the lies, he / tells himself / If my second assertion is true, then this statement would also be true in a double entendre. And damp, #X200b, Mobius, I don't know. Something just seems a little off. Ravonna, fine, you want the truth? I'm trying to protect you. Here, Ravonna finally cracks and admits to Mobius that she's trying to protect him / If my second assertion is true, then Ravonna is trying to protect Mobius Prime, and so technically telling the truth. And damp, #X200b, Ravonna, when we're out there fighting for the fate of the sacred timeline, we're also fighting for this, for us. Friends against time, allies to the end. You've seen all of existence. Same as me. So, you know, friendship like ours is uncommon, and worth fighting for. Same as the sacred timeline. Here, Ravonna expresses her endearment for Mobius. Since Ravonna claims to be close with the Timekeepers, who we just discovered are just mindless androids, we can assume that she is actually close with Mobius Prime. This would explain the other favorite analyst and why she looks so sad when she has to prune our Mobius. And damp, #X200b, these lines seem innocent enough, but using the perspective that Mobius Prime is the overarching villain, they take on entirely new meanings. With Mobius as the new, standalone villain, stopping him and the TVA could make way for the next chapter of Marvel movies, which we know will be multiverse-centric: Spider-Man, No Way Home, Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania. By taking out the TVA and stopping them from pruning alternate timelines, the multiverse could become a reality. And damp, #X200b, Dr. The sacred timeline equals the Mobius timeline. Mobius is the big bad. Bonus foreshadowing, in the end credits, Owen Wilson's name appears before cutting directly to the center timekeeper. Considering Tom Hiddleston appears in these cast credits first, you would think Owen Wilson would be second or third. Instead, several other actors are listed after, leaving Owen Wilson for last. Coincidence? I think not. I'm just gonna do a fucking wild out there theory. Doctor Strange is going to be the big bad of the Loki TV show. He created the TVA so there wouldn't be a multiverse because he's seen the damage it can cause. So Loki takes down the TVA, and that's what causes the Multiverse of Madness movie to come into existence. Finale theory: there is more than one Sylvie. One is with Loki, and the other is at the castle at the end of time. Dr. It's Sylvie in the castle at the end of time. Ravonna took Sylvie as a child without a Nexus event to prevent Sylvie from destroying the TVA in the future. The first time she was taken from her timeline, she escaped and destroyed the TVA. Ravonna went back and took her as a child, hoping to fix the problem before it started. But, here's how it works. Sylvie was taken the first time after a Nexus event as an adult, but she escaped and destroyed the TVA. Ravonna was one of the few survivors and managed to go back in time and attempted to prune Sylvie as a child. It was a reaction to the first time she was captured. She has no Nexus event. But as in most time travel stories, as much as you try to change the past, the outcome remains the same. Sylvie escapes again and is the Sylvie we know in the show. The first Sylvie created the Void by destroying the TVA. The first Sylvie created the Void when she destroyed the TVA. Since the TVA does not exist to help manage this space, it became a void, a jumbled mess of space, taking over by the strongest beings. She unleashed. The first Sylvie destroyed the TVA and now sits hidden at the end of time alone. She is she who remains. As the trailers suggest, Loki and current Sylvie become separated at the end, and Loki will most likely face the first Sylvie alone. First Sylvie will ask Loki to stop her at any cost. She was wrong. Destroying the TVA opened the door to something far worse. So who's in control? Sylvie is not in control, and neither is anyone else. She doomed the timeline. The timeline is broken at the Void and cannot progress past that point when Sylvie burned the TVA to the ground. Ravonna has gone back and set up a believable facade with the Timekeepers to control the variants working at the TVA. But in truth, she is at the helm of this sinking ship. Perhaps she pruned or killed the original director when she came back. Ravonna imprisoned the original TVA director, He Who Remains, at the end of time and is attempting to change the timeline in her favor. But He Who Remains left a contingency plan to foil the TVA at every turn. Loki's Dr. Renslayer has imprisoned He Who Remains at the end of time. She took over the TVA and destroyed the TVA agents he created. She replaced them with people she kidnapped. But He Who Remains placed a failsafe within the timeline. A steady supply of Lokis. A chaotic, mischievous villain turned hero that always, despite everything, sacrifices himself for the greater good. The theory. A conqueror in her own right. The TVA used to run pretty well. An organization of created beings managed by He Who Remains. Together they monitor the proper flow of time, not control it. Somewhere along the timeline, Ravonna Renslayer infiltrated the TVA. She managed to defeat He Who Remains and maroon him at the end of time without a temp pad. She eliminated the original TVA agents and replaced them with brainwashed people kidnapped from the timeline, and this is why the information on the origins of time is not available. She erased it because it reveals her deception. Prune. Reset. Repeat. Ravonna attempts to change the timeline by editing the past, but things are not working very well. Every time she tries to change something in her favor, she creates apocalypses and destruction. So ironically, she creates the places that Sylvie can hide. She may have control of the timeline but not the foresight to run it. This is why there is a void at the end of time. Renslayer cannot create time, and she can only prune and reset unfavorable outcomes. Chaos theory. But the worst part for Ravonna is the Lokis. Each time she gets close to succeeding at deviating from He Who Remains timeline, a Loki pops up. This causes huge problems, branch timelines, apocalypses, and literal ends of worlds, leading her to continue having to do damage control to fix the problem. But as soon as she prunes a Loki, another pops up in its place. Lokis are a thorn in her side and the jewel in He Who Remains crown. The anti-Lokis. Lokis are an eternal source of chaos. Before being captured by Ravonna, He Who Remains changed the TVA's system to always trigger a Nexus event for Lokis, sending his would-be usurper, Ravonna, an almost never-ending supply of chaos. This is why the TVO has pruned so many Lokis. Every reality's Loki has sent a variant to the TVA. The real Aesop He Who Remains sleeve is Sylvie and are Loki. The anti-Lokis. The hero Lokis. The ones, unlike the others, the ones willing to sacrifice themselves for others and bring down the TVA. So ironically, Loki always has had his own glorious purpose built into time itself. He is the savior of our timeline and protector of the multiverse. Main timeline Loki is still alive since Old Man Loki's Nexus event isn't escaping Thanos, but rather escaping the planet he spent his life on. It checks out because if the Nexus event was Loki not dying, they would have caught Old Man Loki way earlier than what they did, and Old Man Loki would be way younger. Kang is gonna reset the series to episode 1. Kang is in charge of the TVA, but with Mobius spreading the truth and the other agents already doubtful, the TVA is ruined, so Kang has no choice but to rewind everything and leave Loki and Sylvie alone. Season 2 will be about Loki breaking the truce to find Sylvie, and Kang attempting to catch them. Not my theory, something I saw. The TVA exists in the quantum realm. This is why Mobius, and even Loki in episode 5, say that time works differently in the TVA and that they don't know how long they have been in the TVA. In Ant-Man and the Wasp, Hope's mom says the same thing about the quantum realm. This can also explain how the TVA travels across space and time using a more sophisticated technology than the Avengers in Endgame. And the final cherry on top, in Ant-Man and the Wasp, there is a city you can see in the background when the Wasp is leaving the quantum realm.